Okay, folks, glad you showed up. Starlight Baptist Church. I'll give you a heads up right now. Some of you are not going to like this message. Some of you are going to be uncomfortable with it. Some might think that it's a subject that should not even be uttered in a Christian type setting. And hence, that's one of the problems. We're in the shape that we're in now, as far as the church is concerned. Sometimes we just fail to talk about the things that God talks about. There is a law in the Bible that some people refer to as the law of first occurrence. And what that simply means is that not always, but a lot of times, the first time that a word is used in the Bible, that usually sets the definition for that word. For instance, the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. So you got the word subtle, sneaky, conniving, whatever synonym you want with it, associated with the devil. That kind of makes sense. The first time the word 13 in the form of the first time it's mentioned, it's with the number. In the 13th year, they rebelled. And so you have 13 in conjunction with the word rebellion. Anybody think of our beginning? 13 states rebelled against Great Britain. So it's a nice little easy, thing that you can do. It's just a little curiosity thing. It's nothing big or major, but it's an interesting study. There's another word, and that happens to be the word imagination. First time that the word imagination is used, it is in the reference of evil. And the imagination of their thoughts was only evil continually. Back in Genesis chapter 6. There was a time in the Gospel of Luke that Jesus is having a running battle, if you please, with the Pharisees. They're always on his tail. They are always hounding at his heels and trying to trip him up. Ask him questions that they didn't think he could answer, or asking him questions they think were going to get him in trouble. This was constant. His whole ministry was like this. And one day they cornered him and asked him about the end of the world. What are things going to be like? And in Luke chapter 17, you want to turn there? Luke chapter 17, he's talking to the Pharisees and the Sadducees about the end of the world. And at the tail end of the conversation, the disciples chirp in. They've got some questions of their own, what things are going to be like. And so Jesus leaves off talking to the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and now he begins to focus in and talk with his disciples. And as the question is asked him, what are things going to be like at the end of the world? What should we be looking for? What signs should we look at? He doesn't answer this one in the sense that he does in other ways at other times. In Matthew chapter 24, for instance, that same basic question is asked him, and he answers it in a little bit different way. He goes on about the wars and the rumors of wars. He goes on about the setup of national kingdoms and empires and how they line up at the end. But in this particular case here, he doesn't go on about the big national battles and wars and countries and so forth. He takes a different tack. And that is, he's going to explain it as far as the moral content of the world will be like. Not so much the political, but now the moral and the spiritual part of this equation. So Jesus looks back from his standpoint, 4,000 years of human history, and he comes up with two events that he wants to accentuate that are going to, in his mind, describe the moral and the spiritual content of the world at the time that he comes back. All the events that he could have picked to describe the scene, he's going to pick these two. Luke chapter 17, beginning in verse 26. Jesus says, and as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it also be in the days of the Son of Man. They did eat, they drank, they married wives, they were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark and the flood came and destroyed them all. Event number one. Event number two takes place 400 years, roughly, after the days of Noah. So they're not side by side, they're not coexistent. One event takes place, a little over 400 years, the next event takes place. Verse 28, likewise, he's tying it in with Noah's day. Likewise also as it was in the days of Lot. So you've got these two events taking place approximately 400 years apart. And Jesus is using those two events to describe the moral and the spiritual condition of the earth in the time that he comes back. Both of them are similar in that they both have to do with sex. Illicit sex. Satan always does this. God takes something pure, God takes something wholesome, God takes something nice. Satan has to come in and corrupt it and turn it into his advantage, if you please. In Noah's day, the predominant problem that kicked off the events leading to the flood was the illicit union between fallen angels and women. That produced a hybrid race that was so corrupt, that was so depraved, that was so fixated and focused on sensual pleasure that everything else went out the window. They were preoccupied with one thing and one thing only. In the case of Lot's time, it was sex again. This time it was not the illicit union between fallen angels and women. It was sex between the same sex. Men with men, men with men, women with women. That attitude and that practice was so prevalent in the city of Sodom that today, almost 2,000 years later or so, we still use that word Sodom to describe the event that was taking place, sodomy. Where do you think the word came from? The word came from the city of Sodom. It was so prevalent in that city, that mindset, that desire, that the act itself would later become named for the city. So when Jesus looked back, when they asked him, what's the sign's going to be like? He didn't mention anything about great warriors and generals and battles. He didn't mention the rise and fall of empires and civilizations. He didn't single out any great discoveries that would change mankind, either for good or for bad. No. He singles out two events that predominantly have to do with illicit sex. And he fixated on those. There's no denying that sex is an integral part of the human psyche. Of all the natural things that we do, there's only one other knee-jerk reaction that is really over sex, and that's self-preservation. We will do anything and everything to save our lives when push comes to shove. We'll yell, we'll scream, we'll kick, we'll fight, we'll run, we'll do anything we can to save our lives. That is the first natural instinct of every living thing. Now, we might not be effective under the circumstances to prevent the loss of life, but we fight for it. That is the first knee-jerk reaction of every human being. We fight for life. The second biggest motivator in our lives is sex. And it's not a bad thing. Both progenitors of the human race, Adam, who started the whole thing, and Noah, who restarted the whole thing after the flood, both of these guys were given a commandment by God, almost word for word. Multiply and replenish the earth. He says that to Adam. Noah comes along, 8 people left. He says to Noah, multiply and replenish the earth. I don't care how you shake it. That is a sexual mandate. Have kids. Multiply and replenish the earth. It is a sexual mandate. So sex in and of itself is not a bad thing. Illicit sex is a bad thing. So don't confuse the two. Don't be so prudish that you ration sex with you and your wife type thing because you think in the back of your head that there's some motivating thing here that, ooh, sex is bad, ooh, sex is wrong. No, it's not. It's just the illicit sex that is wrong. So in Noah's day, as we mentioned, the resulting union of fallen angels, and we've touched on this before, I'm not going to make a big deal of it now, but an angel who walk in this room right now, you could not distinguish the angel from a man unless the angel decided to, present himself in a different form. But every single angel mentioned in the Bible looked like a male, acted like a male, spoke like a male. You couldn't tell the difference of an angel and a male unless the angel revealed it unto you. That's why Hebrews says, as far as we're concerned, in this day and age, some have entertained angels unawares. You may have, in your life, come in contact with somebody you thought was a person, acted like a person, talked like a person, but in reality, it could have been an angel. You wouldn't know. God's not going to bother to tell you. So this concept that some people have, ooh, an angel, you know, the big wings and the little cherubim and the little baby and all that stuff. Oh, how can that have sex with a lady? Oh, no. Forget that. That is not a correct depiction of an angel. Angel looks like a man. And someone else says, well, yeah, but Jesus said they're like the angels in heaven. They don't get married. No, that's correct. The angels don't get married in heaven. They're all males. Jesus was very explicit the way he phrased that statement. They are as the angels of God in heaven, in that they don't marry. Has nothing to do with that fallen angel comes down to earth here, and he sees the women, of which Genesis says, and they took all of which they chose. It's a whole different ballgame now. So the resulting offspring of that union was so depraved and so evil that it got to a point in the human race that it was said that every thought of their head was only evil continually. Because you got to figure there's generations of these things going on. It wasn't just one little batch of angels came down and had one little set of offspring. No, I'm sure there was grandpas, grandmas, great-grandpas, great-great-great-grandpas, and so forth. This went on for a long time until it degenerated the entire human race except for the 8 people. And at that point, God had to step in physically and to stop the whole thing. So what about Lot? Well, Lot's thing, it had to do with angels. Angels were there, again, in the form of men. And when the men of the city saw the angels, which looked like men to them, let's go back to Genesis chapter 19. Genesis 19. And you remember the story, how God looked down on the city. There was 2 of them, really, sister cities side by side. There was Sodom and there was Gomorrah, which is a sister city. They were both so wrapped up in this whole thing of homosexuality and so forth that God just couldn't take it anymore. He just fed up right after a year, and he was done with it. So he sends 2 angels to the city, specifically to Lot and his family. They meet Lot. Lot brings them back to the house. And the men of the city get wind of the fact that there's a couple of visitors that have come to stay with Lot for the night. Ooh, fresh meat. And so the men of the city, they begin to congregate around Lot's house. Look at verse 1, very explicit here. And there came 2 angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom, and Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And at that point, he invites them to his house to spend the night. Verse 4, It's supper time, or, they've had supper. Now it's time they're going to go to sleep. But before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young. So it's not just the old geezers, not just the young, vibrant guy. It's the old and the young. It's everybody. All the people from every quarter. And they called unto Lot and said unto him, where are the men? Now remember, verse 1 said they're angels, but they didn't look like angels. They looked like men. And so the men naturally assumed that they're men. So hence the question, where are the men which came in unto thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. That's a euphemism for having sex. Today we use the word, oh, we're going to sleep together. No. You're not sleeping. That's not the deal. But you see, it sounds a little more quaint. It sounds a little more neutral. It sounds a little bit, cuter than say, we're going to go to bed and hump our brains out. Bring out the men that we may know them. And they're not looking to shake hands. They're not looking to introduce themselves and say, what do you do for a living? How much do you make? And so forth. They want to know them. And so you have these two events. Noah, illicit sex. Lot, illicit sex. Now remember, the primary question was given to Jesus, what is going to be the sign of your coming back? Jesus said, you want to know what the sign is? I'll tell you. This preoccupation with illicit sex. Are we starting to see a pattern here? Are we looking around in 2022, almost 2023? Are we seeing a pattern? Do we see what's going on socially around us? Do we see which wheel is squeaking the most and getting the most oil and the most attention? The moral condition of the world at the time that Jesus comes back is going to initiate another house cleaning, if you please. Church will be taken out at the rapture. We're going to be gone. The Antichrist will rear his ugly head. Satan will proclaim himself as God, and there will be literally hell on earth. So the act of Sodom comes from the city of Sodom. Remember the law of first occurrence. Illicit sex, sodomy, from the city of Sodom, the first time it's mentioned. I'll tell you this. As far as the Bible is concerned, because I know there's a lot of people, you have maybe relatives who are gay, or bi, or trans, or whatever the gender pronoun that we're supposed to use for them is these days. Some people have relatives that they love. The Bible doesn't say stop loving them. But sometimes these folks are offended when a preacher or somebody else will just simply read what the Bible says about that particular individual. The Bible has a lot to say about homosexuality, about lesbianism, about trannies, about, the whole thing. It's got a lot to say about it. And I'll guarantee this, and you can just get your concordance, you can go through, look up the words, look up the synonyms, the adjectives, whatever. Every single time in this Bible that homosexuality and all the other derivatives of that name is mentioned, it is never, ever, ever said in a positive, correct, nice way. The Bible never gives you the impression that God is pleased with it, that he condones it, or that he likes it. You can read every verse in the Bible about this subject. You will not find one single solitary verse that is not only not positive, it is not even neutral. God does not even go to the neutral ground and say, yeah, they're here and they're there and they do their thing. And yeah, they can be productive members of society and they can join the army and they're good fighters. Shoot, the Spartans, almost to a man back in Greece in the 300s, they were almost all gay. Probably one of the greatest fighting forces the world has ever known, the Spartans, all gay. And I won't even go into the history of that as to why they became gay, but they were. So God isn't putting them down because they don't have courage or they don't have talent or they're not smart or anything. It's that lifestyle that God hates. And the third guarantee on this, every single solitary time that the Bible mentions this subject, not only is it not done in a positive way or a neutral way, it is always done in a negative way. It is always called out as sin, reprehensible, depraved, and unnatural. And I'm sorry if that hurt your feelings. That's the whole point of a message like this, is to wake people up. Because society has so framed the subject matter that now we are literally by law forbidden to say anything like this. We are forbidden by law to put them down in that sense. Told you, this isn't going to be an easy way. It's not easy for me. I don't get any pleasure out of this. I don't get any, thrill for being controversial or, any of this junk. It doesn't make me feel good. I'd love to get up here every week and talk about, God 3:16. But unfortunately, God 3:16 is one verse out of 33,000 or so verses. God has a lot to say about a lot of other things outside of love. So in our time now, where we live, when Jesus said, you want to see how it's going to be when I come back? You look at Noah's day, you look at Lot's day. Here we are. We're in that time now. And what is the big universal obsession? It's sex. You see it in advertising. You see it in comedians. You see it in everything. Guys fantasize about what they want. Girls fantasize about what they want. We're circling the drain from a moral standpoint. Yeah, we got, our cell phones are great. We can do a trillion things on the cell phone. Everything's automatic. AI is really starting to, find its own now, artificial intelligence. We're going to have robots one of these times that can do everything but, whistle Dixie. Oh, smartphones can do that for you. So from a moral standpoint, We're circling the drain. And unfortunately, it doesn't really hit us between the eyes because we have been exposed to it for so long. We have been gradually inundated with this thing for so long. It is so pervasive in everything around us that we've gotten immune to it. We don't notice it anymore. The old adage, we go along, we get along to go along. So we just wink at the stuff. We say, well, that's just human nature. Well, that's them, but it's not me. And we're so used to it now. We're so involved in it that we don't even recognize it anymore. Remember as a kid in the old days, we didn't have showers or anything. We had tubs. And, moms would usually, set the tub for us. And the water was really, really hot. And you'd get in and you'd have to, the toe, the foot, the knee, the thigh. And then you'd go, when you got your butt down in, then you get that another shock of heat and hot. And then you'd get down, you'd settle in. And after a couple of minutes, you're used to it. It wasn't hot anymore. It was just lukewarm. And then you'd take the spigot and you'd heat it up some more. Because you had lost that initial sense of feeling. And that's where we are in a spiritual sense right now. We have lost that feeling that there are certain things that God deems as sin. But because we have people that are relatives to us, or we have people that we like, or people that we admire for, how good they are in their field of endeavor, we kind of just dismiss it. And we say, no, God must be wrong on this part. They're good people. They're loving people. They're smart people. They're effective people. They're good to go. They'll take a bullet for you. Doesn't change the fact that not one single solitary verse, not one single solitary time that it is mentioned in the Bible is it mentioned in a positive way, ever. So as we circle the drain, I'll tell you where this is going to go, where it's going to end up, because you can see the beginnings of it right now. If you are so inclined, and I don't suggest this, but it's there. Some of you might know that it's there. You can actually go on a phone right now, your cell phone, iPhone, smartphone, whatever it's called. You can go on there now and you can see people having sex with animals. Today, 2022. Now, you might have to search to find it, but it's there. Sex with animals. Have you ever wondered why the liberals in this country in the last couple of years are starting to push sex education lower and lower and lower and lower as far as the grade and the age of these kids are concerned? Because there is a certain element of our society that does want it legal, that you can have sex with kids. Imagine that. 4, 5, 6, 7-year-olds. Sex with kids. You've got lobbyists right today in 2022 pushing that legislature at some level, whether it be the state level or the federal level. Somebody's pushing it. That's why I say we're circling the drain. So they keep pushing this thing, sex education, on younger and younger and younger people. Why? Because they need a whole new batch of recruits. You say, oh, that's depraved. Yeah, how about that? Oh, that's sick. Yeah, how about that? Oh, we would never do that. Really? Yes, we would. Yes, we will. As a society, at some point, it's going to get to that point. And so why are they inundating and indoctrinating these kids at this age? What's the little second, third-year-old got to do with sex? Why do they have to learn gender pronouns? Why do they have to learn how life is created? Because society wants to use them. That's how bad it is. So we've perverted God's intent for sex beyond all recognition. What's it going to be like when Jesus comes back? As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it also be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. Likewise, as it was in the days of Lot. Heavenly Father, I pray for this country. I pray for the Christians in this country because we are subject to this stuff too. Our hands are tied sometimes. Some of us are so ignorant on this subject that they don't believe half of what I just said this morning. I know that. Half of what I said this morning, the average Christian doesn't believe. Because we've been so indoctrinated, we've been so inundated with this stuff for so long that we're climatized to it. We're acclimated to it. We're not shocked by it anymore. So, Father, I'm not trying to pray ourselves out of the rapture. I'm not trying to pray ourselves out of another 1,000 years of this degradation. I realize that the end is coming. The end is near. We are circling the drain. It is unstoppable. And so my prayer today is not so much that we can all band together and get on your good side and you just completely, say, all come free and let us off the hook in this respect. I'm looking forward to the day that you come back. I'm looking forward to the day that you wrap this thing up and you blow that trumpet and we take off. I'm looking forward to it. But in the meantime, Father, we still have kids to raise. We still have loved ones that we're concerned about. We still have to live in this society. And it's becoming almost unbearable now. Our thought process are infected. Our speech is so monitored. They are so protected now by the government that we can't preach against it. We can't talk about it. We can't raise the subject up for fear of being classed as a homophobe or a transphobe or whatever that term is. And so we just shut up. In the meantime, Satan just keeps marching on. And society just keeps getting worse and worse. Yeah, bring out the men that we may know them. I haven't even got into Romans chapter 1, Lord. Holy moly, there's a whole chapter you've got on that one. I didn't even touch on it because that would take 2 or 3 lessons just to go through that one alone. So, Father, my prayer today is for the Christian, not so much for the world at this point. I'm praying for the Christian because we're the ones getting hurt by this thing. Our kids are subject to this stuff when they go to school. Our kids are subject to this junk that is crammed down their throat in the 2nd and 3rd grades. So I'm praying for the Christian, Father, that you give us the insight, give us the light, give us the guts, give us the fortitude to stand up and I get so frustrated, I can't even articulate this thing. So, Father, I'll just leave it at that. I can't do anything about it, but you can. And so I'm asking you, Father, on an individual, on a family basis, that you would bless the church, that you would bless your people, open our eyes where we need it, Give us the guts to stand up for what we know is right and let the chips fall where they will. The chips fall where they will. And Lord, I ask you this in Jesus' name.